I just didn't know yet how big the fire was going to be. 3 weeks later I knew exactly. It started small, the way these things always do. A couple of corner beefs that used to get squashed with one phone call from me, now went unanswered because the new Community Trust ambassadors were still in week 2 of their de-escalation training and didn't know Lil Saint from Lil Reese. Then the first body dropped. 17-year-old honor roll kid caught in the middle of a dice game that turned into a drive-by because nobody was watching the block anymore. Hargrove held another press conference, blamed lingering toxic masculinity from the previous administration, and promised more ambassadors. I tried to warn them. Sent a 9-page memo up the chain laying out the exact escalation pattern I'd seen in 98 and again in 11. Names, corners, beefs older than most of the new detectives. I even attached the burner numbers that were already lighting up with hits. The memo came back with a sticky note in Hargrove's perfect handwriting. Please refrain from fear-mongering. Focus on your transition duties. That was the day I stopped trying. I walked into her office at 0800 on a Monday, dropped my shield and my duty weapon on her desk, and told her I was taking terminal leave effective immediately. 26 years, 3 commendations for bravery, 2 mayor's awards, and I was done. She looked almost relieved. Sergeant Harlan, this kind of dramatic exit is exactly why we need new blood. Ma'am, the blood's about to be on the pavement. You just made sure nobody's there to mop it up. Security escorted me out like I was a civilian. I didn't fight it. I signed the paperwork, turned in my raid jacket, and walked out past the roll call room where Alvarez was trying to explain to 4 brand new detectives how to read a gang ledger using only open source Instagram posts. She looked up when I passed, eyes wide, mouth half open like she wanted to say something. I just gave her the smallest shake of my head. Some lessons you can't teach. You have to watch people die for them. They replaced me with Captain Marcus Whitlock, 34 years old, former public information officer, Masters in Strategic Communications, 0 felony arrests to his name. His first act as acting commander of what was left of the gang unit was to repaint the war room pastel blue, because aggressive colors promote aggressive policing. His second act was to schedule a TikTok live at the worst corner into worst corner and at 11 p.m. They did it on a Friday night at 11 p.m. on 78th and Figueroa, right where the Rollin' 40s and the 43rd Street Hustlers share a border nobody had respected since I stopped enforcing it. I watched the whole thing from my couch with a beer I didn't taste. Whitlock stood there in a soft body vest 2 sizes too big, smiling like he was at a college career fair, while some kid in a ski mask danced behind him, throwing up gang signs for the camera. The chat was pure chaos, fire emojis, laughing emojis, people posting the exact time and location like it was a concert. At 11:17 p.m. the screen went black. Somebody started shooting. Not at the cops, at each other, right through the live feed. You could hear Whitlock screaming, "We're just here to talk," before someone yanked the phone out of his hand and the stream cut. By morning we had 6 dead, 11 wounded, and the mayor declaring a local state of emergency. Hargrove went on television pale as printer paper, and promised a full tactical response. She just didn't have anyone left who knew what that meant. The Reyes cartel chose that exact weekend to move their biggest shipment ever. 23 containers off a Panamanian freighter that used to get hit by our port task force twice a month. The port unit had been downsized to 1 sergeant and a part-time analyst who mostly processed parking tickets now. Customs waved the containers through. The paperwork was perfect, and nobody was left who knew how to read between the lines on a bill of lading. 480 kilos of pure fentanyl, laced heroin hit the streets in 72 hours. Street price dropped so fast half the old-school dealers started giving it away, just to keep customers alive long enough to come back. Hospitals went into surge capacity by Tuesday. EMS ran out of Narcan on Wednesday. The coroner's vans worked double shifts and still couldn't keep up. Kids were dropping in high school bathrooms, in movie theaters, on the goddamn subway. One 12-year-old girl OD'd in the middle of a Chuck E. Cheese birthday party while the animatronic band kept singing, "Happy Happy Birthday." Her mother had to be sedated in the parking lot. Meanwhile, the gang war exploded exactly the way I said it would. The Ray's crew used the chaos to wipe out 2 rival cliques in one night. 23 dead in a series of executions that started at a baby shower in South Park and ended with a triple homicide in a church parking lot during Wednesday night Bible study. The shooters wore those neon vests from Hargrove's ambassador program. Took them right off the kids, who'd been handing out flyers the week before. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. Whitlock tried to run a briefing on Thursday, and nobody showed up. Half his remaining detectives had transferred out. The other half were hiding in the property room, pretending to catalog evidence. Hargrove finally activated the tactical platoon, except she'd cut their training budget too, so they rolled out with expired less lethal rounds and rifles that hadn't been zeroed since the Obama administration. First call they got was an active shooter at Manual Arts High School, some 16-year-old who'd watched his little brother turn blue from bad dope, decided to take it out on the world. SWAT got there 48 minutes later because their armored Bearcat was in the shop. Budget shortfall, no parts. They went in with 2 unmarked sedans and whatever was in their trunks. The kid killed 3 teacher-in students before a school resource officer with a personally owned AR put him down. The officer got suspended the next day for unauthorized use of deadly force because Hargrove had outlawed patrol rifles the month before. By Friday the feds were in town whether we wanted them or not. DEA set up in the federal building and immediately asked for my old files. Hargrove told them everything had been digitized and archived. For transparency. Translation: Alvarez had spent 3 weeks scanning 20 years of handwritten notes into a system that redacted anything useful. The special agent in charge called me at home that night and basically begged me to come back as a consultant. I told him to talk to the chief. He said he tried. She told him my expertise was rooted in a punitive paradigm that no longer serves the community. Saturday morning the city looked like a war zone. National Guard rolled in because we literally didn't have enough bodies to cover calls. Every news channel had the same helicopter shot. 3 square miles of Central on fire, literal fire, because looters torched Restrip Mall when the police stopped responding to anything that wasn't a mass casualty event. The 9/11 system crashed twice from overload. People were tweeting their own addresses with, "Please send help." And nobody came. I sat on my porch drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago and watched the smoke rise in the distance. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Old informants, retired partners, even a couple judges asking if I could do something. Anything. One text just said, "They're saying your name on the block again. Oh gee. Like you the only one who ever kept it from burning." Sunday night the mayor finally ate shit on live television and announced that Chief Hargrove had stepped down to pursue other opportunities. They reinstated me at my old rank +1, emergency powers, whatever I needed. The press release called it, "Return to proven leadership during this difficult time." I stood in the parking lot of the 77th at 0400, Monday morning, in jeans and an old raid jacket, watching the few detectives who hadn't quit yet straggle in like shell-shocked soldiers. Alvarez was crying so hard she could barely salute. Whitlock was nowhere to be seen. Turned out he'd taken stress leave the day before, and was already interviewing for a podcast about police reform. I looked at the burnt-out shell of what used to be my city, and felt something settle in my chest like a stone. The fire was here now. And somebody had to put it out. The terminal filled with lines of white text on black. Connecting to Oracle. Exporting ledger headers. Exporting ledger entries. For a minute, it looked comfortingly boring. CPU on the Oracle box ticked up from 12% to 40, then 65 as the script pulled millions of rows. Our SAN latency spiked, but still within normal range. I watched the progress bar crawl across the shared screen 10%, 25, 50. In the FiKitover Slack channel, people posted green checkmark emojis like we were launching a rocket, not disassembling the beating heart of our business. At 60%, the first warning message popped up, warning null settlement date for 1327 entries, the script printed. Applying default. I leaned toward my microphone. Why are there null settlement dates? Those rows are either in flight or in error. We don't want to blindly apply default. Ravi replied calmly, these are historical artifacts. The transformation spec says we can default to transaction date if settlement date is null. I said, that spec is wrong. There's a reason those are null. Some are pending ACH returns, some are chargebacks in dispute. We have a separate state machine in core that tracks them. If you set settlement date, your new ledger will treat them as finalized. He said, but the counts will match. For financial reporting, counts don't matter as much as states. Marcus cut in. Is this going to materially delay the migration? He asked. If we stop and write a fix now, yes, I said. Or we document that you're reclassifying in-flight funds as settled, and accept the risk that your regulatory reporting is off. Silence for half a beat. Then Marcus said, proceed. We'll handle exceptions as we find them. Risk accepted. I wasn't the change owner. I'd been very deliberately stripped of that authority in the new RICI matrix Marcus had circulated 2 weeks earlier. Under Ledger Modernization, my name appeared in the Consulted column, not responsible or accountable. So I sat back and watched, feeling like I was watching someone perform surgery with a butter knife, because the board liked how shiny it looked. The script marched on. Export complete. Transforming records. The transform phase was where they mapped our normalized relational schema. Ledger entry, payment, adjustment, fee, interest accrual, etc. into their document model. Each customer would end up with a ledger document in Mongo containing an array of transactions, each one of which contained embedded subdocuments for payment details, fees, interest, and metadata. It was simple, elegant, and fundamentally ill-suited to our reality, where a single payment could be associated with multiple principal and interest lines, promo balances, and late fee reversals, all over different time horizons. Warning detected 4987 orphaned fee records. Attaching to nearest transaction by timestamp, the script printed next. I said, those are not orphaned. Those are proactively waived fees. They must be represented differently or your regulatory fee disclosures will be wrong. We will adjust in a later reconciliation job, Ravi said. We must complete the main migration. Marcus, keep going. Risk accepted. I watched the warnings scroll by like the prelude to an accident I'd already predicted in my 20-page doc. The counts at the end more or less matched. Oracle Ledger entries 92 to 13. Mongo Ledger. Transactions 92 487 221. Close enough, Ravi announced triumphantly. I jumped on that. Close enough is not a phrase you ever say about a ledger. Why are we missing 12? He ran a quick query. These are test accounts, he said. Internal testing. No money movement. Marcus looked at me. Material, he asked. I had a mental list of test accounts we used that actually hit the processors with live but reversible funds. But those were few. If these really were pure sandbox accounts, fine. I made a note in my own private log. Migration missing 12 entries, claim test only, unverified. Then they moved to the codeover proper. API gateway feature flag ready, Ravi typed in Slack. Flipping Drew payments, Ledger. Balances routes to new services. The switch was anticlimactic. A single config push, then a rolling deploy of the updated API pods. Our health checks were naive. They just checked that the HTTP endpoints responded with 200 OK within 500 NEMs. Nothing about data correctness, nothing about side effects. The new node services cheerfully returned healthy. For the rest of Friday night, traffic was a trickle. We'd paused originations and scheduled most maintenance ahead of time. A few customers tried to log in, check balances, schedule payments. CPU on Mongo climbed as the new ledger services did their first few reads and writes. Our Oracle graphs, for the first time in 8 years, began to go flat. I watched the old king die. Around midnight, with no obvious explosions, Marcus declared success. Great work, everyone, he said on the Zoom. We'll keep monitoring over the weekend. On Monday, we'll resume full volume traffic. Get some rest. I didn't sleep well. I dreamed in log lines and stack traces. There's a particular dread you get when you know a system intimately, and something massive has changed. It's like walking out of your house knowing there's a gas leak, but the inspector signed off and your landlord told you not to worry. Saturday morning, I checked the dashboards from my kitchen table. Mongo CPU was higher than I liked, but still under 50%. The autoscaler in Kubernetes had spun up a few more pods for the ledger service overnight when our nightly batch jobs ran. Those jobs had been partially refactored to call the new services for balance reads while still using core for certain types of reporting. It was a delicate dance. I dug into the logs. I saw some weirdness. An interest accrual job logged. Warning, ledger mismatch for account 387291. Expected balance 1234.V6. Actual 1234.506 Tausender epsilon. I stared at that word for a long moment. It meant they were using doubles for currency somewhere. We had a strict rule: all monetary values are stored and calculated in integer sense, with big decimal in Java, when we must present decimal points. Floating point was banned. It led to phantom pennies and reconciliation nightmares. I screenshotted the log and posted it in 5kudover. Who wrote the accrual adjustment using epsilon? I asked. That's not acceptable for monetary values. A junior developer on our side, assigned to assist the vendor, replied. They said it was fine to adjust for floating point representation errors. I nearly choked on my coffee. Show me the code, I said. Link. He sent a link to their Git repo. In a node JS file, I saw it const epsilon 0.1 if math abs computed balance ledger balance epsilon ledger balance computed balance. It was the kind of hack you use to compare floating point timestamps, not dollars. I wrote, this is not okay. You cannot fudge balances, even by fractions of a cent, via a heuristic. Either your calculation is correct, or your data is wrong. He replied, vendor said we'll reconcile at report time. Don't worry, they know this pattern. I pinged Marcus privately. This is exactly the kind of thing I warned about. I wrote. They're literally messaging balances to hide floating point errors. That will bite us in audits. He answered 10 minutes later. I appreciate your vigilance, he wrote. Log the issue in Jira so we can address it in phase 2. Right now, the important thing is system stability. System stability. I closed the laptop and forced myself to go outside, touch grass, try not to obsess over floating point sins. Sunday was quiet, no major alerts. A few small anomalies in logs, but nothing the offshore team or our skeleton weekend crew couldn't wave away as expected variance or logging noise. By Sunday night, the war room Slack had devolved into memes. On Monday at 8 a.m., the gas found the spark. Our product marketed itself heavily as get paid 2 days early. Mondays were one of our busiest days. Employers, direct deposits hit. We advanced paychecks. We pulled ACH payments for loan repayments. We processed card transactions from the weekend. At 8:05, I watched the dashboards as load ramped up. API RPS climbed from a sleepy 30 requests per second to 400, then 800. Historically, our monolith and Oracle handled that with some grumbling but no drama. On the new stack, I watched Mongo CPU spike to 85%, then 95%. Disk I/O pests slammed into the ceiling. The Kubernetes HPA spun up more pods for the ledger and payments services, but they all hammered the same underlying cluster. Latency on the two balances P95 to 1.2 seconds. The P99 hit 5 seconds. Our mobile apps had a 3-second timeout. The first sign of real trouble popped up in the FES support channel. A frontline rep copied in a customer chat. Why is my balance showing negative? I got paid this morning. Another app says I owe $2,147,483,647. Is this a joke? My stomach dropped at that number. It was the max value of a 32-bit signed integer. Somewhere, someone had overflowed a balance. I opened Kibana and filtered logs for errors in the ledger service. They were pouring in now. Mongo error, write conflict. Node heap out of memory. Unhandled promise rejection. And sprinkled among them, error. Integer overflow converting long to int. Bit used a plain 32-bit int in some intermediate calculation, likely for accumulated interest or available credit calculation, and the high-volume accounts were tripping it. The code tried to clamp it or log it, but in some flows it made it back to the API response. That explained the absurd balances. At 8:17, the first payment processor alert hit. Our primary ACH processor posted in their status channel. We are observing a high rate of duplicate submission IDs from client Lendwell. Please investigate. I yanked open the node payment service logs. The idempotency layer they'd implemented was flawed. We'd told them, use a deterministic idempotency key, something like user-id sus transaction type UX, external-id, and store it in a strongly consistent store with a uniqueness constraint. They'd done something entirely different. To get performance, they were generating a random UID per request and caching it in Redis with a 5-minute TTL. If a retry came in without the same UID header, it was treated as a new payment. Worse, the outbox pattern was half implemented. In some cases, they wrote to Mongo and then published to Kafka. In others, they published first and wrote later, with no transaction linking the two. Under load, and with Mongo throwing write conflict errors, as it struggled with concurrent updates to the same customer documents, retries were flying all over the place. I saw one logline sequence for received payment request ID IPC 123 amount 250 odred. Wrote ledger transaction ID TX1001. Kafka publish failed. Retrying received replay from a gateway for IPC 123 new UI def 456. Wrote ledger transaction ID takes X1002. Kafka publish success. ACH debit file record generated twice. That meant some customers were being double charged. Exactly the nightmare I'd predicted when I wrote about idempotency in my doc. I jumped into the Fafkudover channel. Stop the world, I wrote. We are double submitting AH debits. We must halt payment processing and flip back to core for payments until we fix this. For 30 seconds, nobody replied. The offshore team was deep in their own fire drills. Their Slack messages were a blur of stack traces and panicked short sentences. Then Marcus, we can't just flip back. That would be worse. There are already records in the new system. You said so yourself. We just need to stabilize. I replied, stabilize by stopping the bleeding. Turn off new debits. Set all payment endpoints to maintenance mode. Now, his answer that would be a customer-facing outage. The board is very sensitive to downtime after last quarter. I wrote, this is worse than downtime. We are actively stealing money from people by mistake. That's lawsuit territory. He went ominously quiet. At 8:23, our call center queue blew up. The omnichannel dashboard showed wait times spiking from 30 seconds to 20 minutes. Chatbots were getting hammered with, my paycheck is missing. And, you took my payment twice. Messages. On Twitter, our brand handle started getting tagged in angry threads. Screenshots of absurd balances. One user posted a screenshot of their account showing they owed 0.01 and asking if we were going to pay them. The memes began. Internally, the on-call SRE, Nadia, paged the incident channel. Declaring SV1, she wrote, symptoms degraded latency, incorrect balances, duplicate ACH submissions, call center overload. Proposed immediate action, disable payment origination endpoints, put site in partial maintenance mode. She tagged Marcus, the CTO, me, and the CEO. The CTO joined the incident bridge still half in a t-shirt, hair a mess. He listened for 2 minutes as Nadia and I summarized. Then he said, cut payments. Do it. Marcus pushed back. Let's not overreact, he said. The vendor is saying they're already deploying a fix to the idempotency middleware. They'll have it in within 30 minutes. We need to give them time. I stared at my RDP window showing Mongo's metrics. It was on fire. Latency on writes to the ledger collection was in double-digit seconds. Each new deploy was just adding more churn. Nadia said, Our SLA says, if customer funds are at risk, we have unilateral authority to halt affected operations. I'm going to pull the circuit breaker. She toggled a flag in our feature management system that we'd thankfully not yet seeded to the vendor. Instantly, our API gateway started returning 503 errors for new payment creation endpoints. The mobile app's "Make a Payment" button went gray, the bleeding slowed. But the damage was already deep. ACH files had already been generated and sent to our processor. Some duplicate debits could be reversed before settlement, but many were already in the pipeline. And we still had balances wrong in Mongo. Every read of the ledger returned whatever mangled state the last concurrent write had produced. Under the hood, their data model used a get whole document, update an app, write back pattern, relying on Mongo's optimistic concurrency. Under high contention, hundreds of payments and accruals and fee updates hitting the same customer doc. The write conflicts were brutal. They'd tried to paper over it with Navery tree logic. Sometimes it silently dropped fields. We started seeing logs like warning, dropped field, promo balance, due to concurrent update, recomputing. That meant the ledger was literally losing information under load. Around 80:45, as we were still wrestling with that fire, a different one ignited. Our SOC lead pinged the security channel, and then the incident bridge. We're getting alerts from our WEF, he said. The new admin API endpoints the vendor deployed appear to be exposed to the public internet. We're seeing suspicious traffic testing them. My heart sank. The vendor had insisted on deploying their own Kubernetes ingress with a separate Nginx layer for flexibility. We'd insisted they keep all management endpoints locked behind our VPN. They'd nodded, said all the right words. Now it turned out they'd left their IaaS admin roots on the same subdomain as the public API, protected only by a wiki key header. Script kiddies scanning for low-hanging fruit were already hitting it. Any sign of exploitation? I asked. He said, I see several 401s, but he trailed off. Wait, there are a few 200s. IPs from a cloud provider. They've hit gay admin exporters 3 times. I felt physically ill. Does that endpoint include Pi? He replied, according to their docs, it's a CSV dump of basic account info for support names, emails, last 4 of SSN addresses, hash passwords. Hashed how? I demanded. Their architect said bripped, he replied weakly. Said, not. We verified. Not. Ran our own pen tests. We'd let them introduce an entire new attack surface in production with effectively self-attestation. Legal joined the call. Then the CEO, her voice was tight. Status? She asked. We laid it out: ledger inconsistencies, double charges, incorrect balances, potential data exposure from an unsecured admin endpoint. For a moment, there was silence. Then she said, do we have a rollback plan? Everyone looked at me, even through the pixels. You know core best, the CTO said. Can we switch reads and writes back to Oracle, rerun the migration from last good state? I swallowed. If you want the honest answer, no, not cleanly. We didn't build a rewind function. We built a one-way door. The moment we started taking writes in Mongo, we diverged. Some customer balances exist only there now. If we flip back to core blindly, we'll erase the last 12 hours. People who paid will show as unpaid. People whose paychecks we advanced won't see the credit. We could try a partial rollback, but we'd have to carefully reconcile every transaction. That would take days. The CEO said, days we don't have. Marcus jumped in. We wouldn't be in this mess if we'd had full cooperation, he said. Some teams have been resistant. We're paying you to be solution-oriented, not to say I told you so. It was a transparent attempt to shift blame in front of the CEO. I ignored it. Here's what we can do, I said. Stop all new writes everywhere. Mongo and core, put the system in full read-only mode. Then we snapshot Mongo as it is now, and build reconciliation tools to compare it to Oracle and the processor reports. We triage fix negative balances and outliers first, get people's visible balances at least approximately right. Meanwhile, we work with the ACH processor to reverse duplicate debits before they settle. For the breach, we have to assume worst case that CSV was exfiltrated. We'll need to start incident response, notify regulators, start drafting customer communication. The CEO let out a slow breath. Do it, she said. Whatever you need. Get a full team on reconciliation. Legal, start the breach protocol. Then, to Marcus after this call, you and I will be talking. The malicious compliance part, if I'm honest, started before the disaster. Started the moment Marcus took away my authority and my production access to streamline our ACI and handed the keys to the vendor and a patchwork of juniors. But it crystallized in that moment, on the bridge, when he tried to throw me under the bus. A month earlier, he'd personally signed off on a policy change that removed senior engineers, including me, from direct production access. All changes had to go through the vendor's CCD pipeline. For accountability, we were limited to read only dashboards and logs. I had protested on security grounds. He'd overruled me, citing vendor best practices. So when the CEO said, "Whatever you need," I replied carefully, "I'll design the reconciliation approach and outline rollback options. But per the current RACI and access policy, I do not have the ability to execute changes in production. I'm read-only. Any changes will have to be made by the vendor team and the SRs you've authorized." Marcus bristled. "This is not the time to quibble about process," he said. "If you need access, we'll make an exception. Go ahead and log into prod, and do what you need." I shook my head. "We have an auditor looking over our shoulder, and we just potentially leaked PI. The last thing we need is an undocumented emergency access that violates our own change control policy. I'm not taking personal liability for that. Grant access through the formal emergency change process, document it, and I'll use whatever you give me. Until then, I'll stick to advisory." It was an exquisitely uncomfortable thing to say, because everything in my engineer nature screamed at me to roll up my sleeves and start fixing. For 8 years, I had been the person who itched into prod at 3 a.m. to hotpatch a broken query, who manually edited a cron job on a misconfigured node to get settlements out the door, but they'd spent months telling me my heroics were type patterns and single points of failure. They'd replaced my pager with a vendor's on-call number and buzzy words about follow the sun support. So I complied with their system. Maliciously, perhaps, but also correctly. The CTO understood immediately. I saw it in his eyes. He said, "I'll initiate emergency access." But that too took time. Time we didn't have. The vendor, meanwhile, flailed. On the bridge, Ravi's team insisted they'd patch the admin endpoint and rotate API keys. Within the hour, our SOC demanded they tear down the entire ingress and move management routes behind VPN. They didn't have the scripts for that ready. They'd treated production as an experiment. Every minute that ticked by was another minute that CSV, if indeed it had been pulled, floated somewhere in an attacker's S3 bucket. Social media went from jokes to fury. Tech journalist we all followed retweeted a thread about our outage with a single word: likes. Faye Lendwell started trending. Customers posted screenshots of overdraft fees from their banks, triggered by our duplicate debits. One thread showed someone whose rent check bounced because we'd yanked their ACH twice overnight. Legal pinged us with a grim note: "If we can't fully reverse these before settlement, we're on the hook for making customers whole." That's direct cash out the door. By noon, our new application signups had dropped to near zero. The marketing team paused all ad campaigns. Why pay to acquire users just to funnel them into a burning building? Partners started calling. One bank we white-labeled for demanded immediate assurances that their customers weren't affected. Our sales VP, facepale, messaged the incident chat privately. "They're talking about pulling the plug on the partnership. That's 20% of our revenue." Meanwhile, inside the company, the finger-pointing began. In a smaller side channel, I saw Marcus DM the CTO. "We need to get ahead of this narrative. This is an implementation issue, not a strategy issue. The strategy is sound. We'll say it was a one-off integration bug. I snorted. There was nothing off about it. Every failure we were seeing was a direct consequence of architectural shortcuts we'd warned them about. Document store for ledger. Weak idempotency. Lack of strong transactions. Insecure admin endpoints. Floating point for money. Implementation was just where the cracks showed. When my emergency access finally came through around 12:30, it was too late to prevent the worst of it. The ACH processor sent us a CSV of all debits we'd submitted that morning. I wrote a quick Python script to diff it against what Oracle thought we'd sent. The result was sickening thousands of duplicates, some triples. We worked with them to flag what we could for reversal, but we couldn't reach them all before settlement. For the breach, our security team did a forensic dive on the logs. Yes, the DTHARS admin export user's endpoint had been hit, and had streamed out CSVs 3 times to an IP address registered to a shady hosting provider. We had to assume the attacker had names, emails, partial SSNs, and password hashes for a non-trivial subset of our users. The compliance officer's face when she heard that could have curdled milk. We will have to report to the FTC, CFPB, state regulators, and possibly card networks, she said. This is not just fines. This is consent decree territory. Externally, we put a Band-Aid PR statement on the website. We are currently experiencing technical difficulties affecting some customer accounts. We are working diligently to resolve the issue. Your funds remain safe. It was technically true in the sense that we weren't insolvent. But to the person whose rent had just bounced because of our technical difficulties, it was a cruel joke. By 3 p.m., the war room had the exhausted, shocked vibe of a disaster site. Pizza boxes had appeared in the office. Remote folks, like me, scavenged our own kitchens. People spoke in low, clipped tones. The CEO had moved from panic to a cold, focused anger. On a brief break from the incident bridge, she messaged me privately. Off the record, she wrote, "If we had listened to you, would this have happened?" I thought carefully. Something would have gone wrong, I typed back. Big migrations always have surprises, but not like this. We would have kept the ledger on Oracle until we had proven parity. We wouldn't have exposed an admin API to the world. We wouldn't have used floating point for money. We would have had a tested rollback path. She responded with a single word. Understood. The next day, HR put 30 minutes on my calendar with a cryptic subject. Check in. I knew what that meant. But that was later. For now, on that Monday bleeding into Tuesday, I sat in front of my glowing screens, watching in slow motion as an arrogant cost-cutting experiment turned into a textbook case catastrophe, and I did exactly as much as their own processes permitted me to do. No more, no less. While the system they'd insisted was good enough showed, in brutal detail, just how wrong they'd been.